Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles and cousins, of course, and my new favorite, banana nanas and banana papas, or if you prefer, grandmothers and grandfathers and baseball fans everywhere, especially major league ones. Welcome to this edition of our Monday Valley Baseball League video podcast. Guys, I'm really excited. Not only is Major League Baseball back, we're starting to get knee deep into the Major League into the Major League playoffs. They're Major League to us. That's, and speaking on behalf of the Valley Baseball League and the teams in this league, since we're not playing this year, we are living vicariously through the 2019 season. And it's time to just kind of pause for a second and take a look back at the 2019 season. And we have a special guest star today. That is so true. Not only do we have Aaron and Jordan here, but we also have the one, the only, the original. He is definitely an original. John Leonard is joining us for this podcast. All right, Aaron, Jordan, join me in a quick. Hey, John, how you doing?
Hi,
I'm
John.
doing fine. Great to be here, guys.
You look a little different than the last time we saw you.
Yeah, going a little different facial hair this time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a new base alignment there for John. We have to note that it's kind of a rough day for John. His Phillies. Come on, John, show us the Phillies shirt.
Yeah.
Didn't do so well today. We got the Marquette shirt on too. Very nice. Let's give a shout out to the Padres too. Can we? Is that only fair? All right. Very nice. Well, John, catch us up, man. It's 2020, and we're looking back at 2019. Aaron and Jordan and I have been having a blast kind of reliving these games. There's still a lot of storylines we haven't had a chance to talk about, but one of the big ones is kind of saying goodbye to the three teams that didn't make the cut. Saying goodbye to the Front Royal Cardinals, the Harrisonburg Turks, and also the Percival Cannons. They all had great moments. The Turks, some great pitching. The Cannons, some great rallying. And the Cardinals, if I remember correctly, help me out here, Jordan and Aaron, comeback wins. And then they had some really good talent with Jose Hernandez, who was there playing in his father's shadow. Roberto Hernandez. As you look back on the 2019 season, John, what stands out to you, and what do you wish you knew now that you didn't know then? Or maybe it's what do you wish you knew then that you didn't know now? I'll leave that one up to you.
Yeah, I'm not even sure. I'm not sure how to answer that. With the Turks in particular, if I could talk about them first, the Harrisonburg Turks had not missed the playoffs since 2009. So it was kind of a big deal that they didn't make it this year. They finished one game behind the Stanton Braves, and I know you guys have talked about this before too. That huge comeback that Stanton had against Harrisonburg was the difference in the end. But Harrisonburg had some very, very good pitchers on that team. They just didn't have them all at the same time, and they had some defections and some players leave early. And ended up finishing 18-24, just one game behind Stanton.
So that wraps up the Harrisonburg Turks. But what about the Front Royal Cardinals, and also what about the Cannons? What stands out to you about those two teams that didn't make the playoffs this year?
Front Royal actually had some good talent on that team. I know you've already mentioned Jose Hernandez. Their best hitter was probably Dylan Menhennet, who was from West Florida. And he had a ridiculous end to his season. I don't know if anybody knows the story, but supposedly with about 6 games left in the summer, his father came to visit him, and they went golfing that day. And when the game started that night, Dylan was exhausted because he had apparently walked 18 holes. His dad ran out to get him some pineapple, I think, and ended up buying some in a country store somewhere close to Front Royal, brought him his pineapple, and Dylan just went crazy. And then his last 6 games, he ended up going 16 for 30 in those last 6 games, ended up hitting 331 overall with 15 doubles. But the team also had Trey Dabney, who was from JMU. He was getting very high ratings from scouts. They think he might have a future in pro baseball. Easton Waterman at catcher, I think he caught 35 of their 42 games, worked really hard behind the plate. Shane Scott on the mound from Arkansas Tech. I know you guys have talked about the shutout that he threw earlier in the year. and Arison Perez from Barry, who was a middle infielder and then also probably their best reliever. The biggest thing, I think, for Front Royal, their coach, who really got high marks, but it was his first year, Coach Tony Herla from Kansas. It was his first year in the Valley, and we often see some growing pains from those first-year coaches. Tony is planning to come back to the Valley, though, so I'm interested to see what kind of improvements Front Royal will make. Purcellville got bit by the injury bug a little bit. They finished 15-27, which was one game ahead of Front Royal at 14-28. The Cannons finished 3 games behind Winchester for that last playoff spot. The big thing for them was losing Jose Aquino, who had 8 home runs in 89 at-bats at shortstop. He went to San Jacinto Junior College. And he ended up with an injured wrist, missed the All-Star game, and then went home. And I think if he had stayed, they would have been pretty good. Might have made the playoffs. Another good player for the Cannons was Bradley Ryopel at catcher from Coastal Carolina, hit 8 doubles and 6 home runs. Purcellville's problem was the pitching. They didn't have pitching up to their usual level, their usual standard.
Yeah, well, I'm going to turn this over to my colleagues in crime here in a second. First, Aaron, I got to point out, I stole the line banana nanas from the Coastal Plain League, but I got to tell you, I'm going to change it to pineapple bananas based on the story that John just told. I'm sorry, but I haven't heard bananas doing that to any player. And if pineapple does that, I'm going upstairs right now to get a can myself. I'm sorry, but it's pineapple nanas from now on.
Hey, you can go with whatever fruit you feel so inclined to go with.
Well, what stands out to you? Any you want to take any shots at John while we have him here? This is our chance. It's open season on John Leonard.
No, I mean, obviously he's studied this league. He's been around the league for a while and thoroughly researched last season. We really enjoyed going through all of his notes from the 2019 Valley season. And even though, some teams got left out, we still had some really good baseball coming up in the playoffs. I mean, these teams all persevered throughout the season despite injuries, despite people, as John said, defecting, which I think is an amazing way to put it. I think that's hilarious. But the playoffs, they always kind of add a little bit different spin, because at that point you do have a lot more players that leave for school. So while you have a team that might have dominated, such as Waynesboro, you might see them perform differently during the playoffs in kind of an unexpected manner. And that's what always kind of fascinates me about summer ball is usually with major leagues, with college ball, you know who your team is throughout the entire season, despite a couple injuries. But there's all these different caveats that come into play at the end of a summer league season.
Yeah, well, let's dial into that a little bit. You touched a little bit on the first-year coaches. We saw growing pains with Zach Cole when he came into Newmarket. He seemed to figure it out. Certainly can say we saw them a little bit with Mike Smith, who came into Winchester for his first season, although he'd been with Winchester in the past as an assistant. I talked a little bit about Tony Herla. Did I say his last name right? From Front Royal Cardinals. Do me a favor, talk a little bit about the first-time coaches, and then talk a little bit about what Aaron brought up, which is kind of the cohesion. I mean, it really takes a unique group to keep these players together, and maybe it comes down to the coach to keep these players going through the regular season and into the playoffs.
Well, I definitely wouldn't want to blame the coaches for the players leaving. Sometimes that happens, I guess. But the biggest thing that I've noticed in the league is the recruiting and how these teams bring players in. I know that in Newmarket, for example, the coach does the recruiting. So if the coach is brand new, the coach is trying to make contacts and trying to find players all over the country, and that can be really difficult at first. You've got Bob Weiss in Harrisonburg who's done it for 30 years. And, Bob has everybody on speed dial. He knows where his players are coming from. But if a coach is new, it's a little more difficult for them. As far as players leaving, the league is constantly kicking ideas around about how to keep guys, how to keep them longer. This year would have been different, of course, with the pandemic stopping the college baseball season. But in a typical season, these guys are playing, dozens and dozens of games in college, and then they're turning around and coming right out here and playing 40 more. Guys get tired, guys get injured, guys miss their girlfriends. I don't think they miss their parents very much. I don't think that's a thing when they're 20 years old. Maybe it is. What do I know? But the league has kicked around ideas like maybe doing the All-Star game later in the year to try to keep the kids around, because usually there are 5 or 6 guys that will leave every year right after the All-Star game. So yeah, the playoffs do sometimes end up being this just to whoever is left. And we saw it with Stanton a little bit last year when they had 10 guys left, and I think they had pitchers batting in lineup positions 7 through 9 for one of those games against Charlottesville. It's actually at that game. It was kind of fun.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that game. Don't give too much away from that. That is, and I'll just come right out and say it, and this is not a spoiler alert, it is definitely my favorite game from last season. Jordan, your turn, man. What shots do you want to take at John? This is all friendly, though, man. Don't hurt him.
Graham, I don't think I'm capable of hurting anybody, let alone John, who's been fantastic with the notes, and the annual has really helped you, Aaron, and I out a lot this season. So, John, thanks for that. But no, actually, a lot of the things that John's already said, I can back a lot of them up, because just this past week, we were talking. He referenced the Harrisonburg and Stanton game, like that game that we all remember. It was the double-digit 9th inning, which then became extra innings finale. And I was actually interviewing Bob briefly. I interviewed him just this past week for a non-VBL related article. He's working right now with the Broadway Bruins and the local neighboring RCBL. And we're in the dugout at Eagle Field, and that game I hated being the guy to mention it. I really felt guilty, but I really had to ask him just what happened. And amongst a lot of things he did say, as far as with the pitchers, a lot of it, obviously pitchers, there were some that left. There were some that I think took injury. But a lot of it also is player management. And I'll get to John with that in a second. And player management, sometimes putting in a player at a certain time and a certain, definitely a part in the game where maybe there's too much pressure. We don't know if he can take care of it or not. There are some guys who battle with pressure better than others. But sometimes when you do put in certain athletes, it might not be the right time for that specific athlete to go in. And he said, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was along the lines of there might have been some guys who it just wasn't the right time to put, X athlete in there. And then he also said, Eagle Field again, me being at JMU, I've interviewed Trey Dabney multiple times, and I interviewed him when he was a freshman. It was only the first week he'd ever been to Eagle Field, and I'm watching him doing batting practice, and I'm in the box watching him play. Norfolk State was the first team I ever saw him play in a JMU uniform against, and he hit a home run in the first year. He's a freshman, and this wasn't kind of like it bounced off the fence, and then this was gone. Like the pickup trucks that were in the back of, they were behind the wall in left field. Like it was over there where people were kind of having little Smokey Joe fires. So Trey Dabney has some absolute power. And it's amazing with the player management and player development. And I really do wish you do see it again with a couple of athletes that do maybe leave a little bit before the season gets to the good stuff. Playoffs, like Aaron's been saying. And guys like Andrew Check, who we know that his story I'm not going to give anything away, but it kind of ends in that ballpark also. John, it really is just interesting that depending on where an athlete is at a certain point in a game, and then additionally where he is in the sense of if he's in your dugout or not when the season's over, it really can curb a season in just one game when you really think about it.
It can. And sometimes you got to put a kid out there and hope for the best. We get many college pitchers that have not thrown many live innings, Get a lot of kids coming off their freshman year, off of redshirt seasons. And sometimes you put them out there and you hope that they can do it. And sometimes they can, and sometimes the wheels come off. But we see it at every level of baseball. I mean, the Phillies, coming back to the Phillies, in game 1 of the season against the Marlins, they had a guy make his major league debut in the middle of that game, and he just could not handle his emotions, and he was all over the place. And then other guys will step up and be lights out right from the beginning. You just don't know with some of these kids. They're human beings, and sometimes they're put in tough positions. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, well, at the end of this, I want to pay tribute to the amazing piece of work you did in your 2019 annual. But before we get there, we've talked about the 3 teams that didn't make it, and we've touched on them. What stands out to you about the teams that did make it? Do you mind touching on the Waynesboro Generals, as Aaron pointed out, swept the Stanton Braves in the regular season, 6 straight games. I mean, they were just a powerhouse. Do you mind going through the lineup and just breaking down, what highlights that stand out to you as we look back a year later at the 2019 season?
Yeah, it was quite interesting seeing Zach Cole move from Newmarket down to Waynesboro, taking the same theories, the same idea of game management with him, and then seeing the Generals make a big jump. I think it was the best winning percentage of the team's history. I don't think it was the most wins, but it was the best winning percentage. Lawrence Nesselrott had some really good teams back in the mid 2000s, maybe 2006 and 7. Waynesboro, there two guys really stood out to me in their lineup, and the first was Wes Clark from South Carolina. I think I named Wes the second best hitter in the league. I think that's right. Was their catcher. And he's like 6'4", 215. As a true freshman in college, he looks the part of a pro baseball player. Wes led them at the plate almost all year, and it was kind of fun. Like it's a little more laid back in the summer, so every once in a while I will be around a team a little closer than maybe I should be. Early on, I went to a Waynesboro-Harrisonburg game, and I was actually in the Waynesboro dugout, and ostensibly to take pictures, but I was able to listen to what was going on, and I love learning more about the game that way. It was so interesting watching Zach Cole work with his lineup and work with them about count and pitch selection. And so Jackson Tate was the second guy I was going to mention. Premium speed. Tate is super fast. He was recruited as a safety by SEC football schools, so he's the real deal when it comes to athleticism. But he was a little more raw at the plate, and Cole just worked with him almost after every at bat, talking through what had happened and what you should be looking for and what your mindset should be on this count and with this pitch. And then what you saw was as the summer went on, Waynesboro got better and better and better, and they started getting production from all up and down the lineup. And then they ended up finishing 31-11 and winning the Southern Division by 6 games. Winning it easily. We won't talk about the playoffs with Waynesboro at this moment, but their regular season was nothing to scoff at. That's for sure.
No, nothing to scoff at. I'll share this at some point, the picture of Zach Cole with the South Division banner. Yeah. Anyway, touch a little bit on the Tom Sox. They've been strong. And the other thing I'll say, by the way, because you're going to come to the Stanton Braves as well, a little compare and contrast between Stanton and Percival. The Stanton was the one team that managed to make 5 errors in a game and still come back and win, whereas other teams couldn't seem to overcome that kind of hump. Anyway, keep walking through our playoff teams from 2019.
First of all, Charlottesville does different things than most of the other teams in terms of some of their own stat gathering with their players, which is kind of interesting. I'd love to be a fly on the wall when they go over some of those things. Charlottesville does a lot of work with their pitchers, doing, the starter going 4 innings instead of sort of as long as they can. So Charlottesville had that thing going with Joe Sprake in specifically, had an excellent season. The guy to talk about with Charlottesville, though, is Thomas Francisco from East Carolina. Was there like Wes Clark. He was a true freshman and came in and hit 400. Played first base mostly, but can play third and can also play in the outfield. And he led their lineup and was one of the top hitters in the league as well.
Yeah, I had a quick thing with Thomas Francisco because I can't remember the exact what his hitting streak actually ended up being. I know, John, if you can recall, was it either slightly under or was it slightly over 20 straight games where Thomas had at least one hit in a ball game?
It was over 20 games. If you give me a second, I'll be able to find it.
It was 23.
There you go. Just as I found it. Aaron, how dare you? Yeah, 23 game hitting streak, and he started his summer that way. I think he hit in the first 23 games that he appeared in. Yeah, in the regular season, he ended up hitting 412 with a 439 on base percentage and a 526 slugging and 114 at bats. He just had this amazing bat to ball ratio. While he only walked 7 times, he only struck out 11. So, when he picked out the pitch to hit, he hit it and usually hit it well.
What happens to me is I end up with some highlights that just kind of stand out in my brain. Obviously, you touched on the comeback between Harrisonburg and it was the comeback between the Braves and the Turks. That one's not likely to be repeated anytime soon. We're going to get to the Braves matchup at the end of the second round of the playoffs against the Tom Sox, but we're not quite there yet. Are there any other highlights that stand out to you or any moments? I didn't realize you were in the dugout with Zach Cole and you got a chance to actually hear him doing some of that coaching. I'm constantly amazed by the skill set he uses and kind of how he works with his players. Aaron, Jordan, anything that stands out to you in the 30 plus 40 plus games that we've recapped this season?
Well, we talked about it several times over the season, but it really seemed like it was a summer for the batters. We had so many guys do so well at the plate that I would have hated to be a pitcher. And if you go back to John's annual from last season, some of the top pitchers that he ranked were from teams that didn't make the playoffs. Harrisonburg had some really good pitchers on the mound, and it's just funny how much the offense really, kind of moved people and how well their team did as a whole versus the defense this summer.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Starting with Aiden Nagel, who is the MVP, Wes Clark, Andrew Check, Caleb Ward, and Lyle Lockhart, also in Woodstock. I even, the subtitle of the 2019 annual, I even called it the Summer of the Hitter. And we have coaches that have to be more careful with their arms. One of the best starters in the league was Jacob Ferris with Harrisonburg, and he was only with us for 5 starts. He had a little over 30 innings, and then he had to leave to protect that arm. And we're seeing that more and more. And that's another reason then why sometimes you have the issue with Stanton and Harrisonburg, right? Where you end up with the guys that didn't have as much experience in really crucial spots because other guys have left.
Yeah, well, let's do this, and then I want to pay tribute to your annual. Great point, Aaron, about the Summer of the Hitter, and point well made, John. How does 2019 compare to other years? You've been following the league closely now for almost 2 decades? Is that? You're closing in on that. You're about 15 years into it now?
Yeah, I started covering it closely in 2006 after that season. Yeah. So
2012, we talked a little bit about it in a podcast we did with Joe. They switched to baseball and everything went ballistic. This wasn't about the baseball this season. How does it compare to other seasons?
It was significantly slanted towards hitting in 2019. Um, I'm starting a new project actually, where I'm going to go back through with and all of the top hitters and starters and relievers that I've done since 2007. There were some years that there was maybe one or two guys that had an OPS of 1,000 or more. I know in 2006, Tyler Kuhn was the best player in the league. He had an OPS at about 960. In 2019, 2, 4, 6, 8, we had 8 players, 8 regular season players with an OPS of over 1,000. We had 4 guys with an OPS of over 1,100. Like it was significantly slanted towards the hitters.
Yeah,
So
keep going.
yeah, no, I was just going to say that that just makes it tougher for everybody. Like no lead was safe, I think.
No, he
In
was safe.
2000.
Well, and I heard Mike Smith talk about that several times. He'd come away from a game, he was ahead 9-4 or something, and he'd come away from the game and just being like, that should be enough to win. I just don't understand. That should be enough to win. Aaron, this is your first year with the Valley. You almost finished the first year. It's like almost time to celebrate the anniversary here. How does that stand out or compare to the Coastal Plain League?
Well, I mean, there was a lot of offense, and that's something that really stood out for me because, you know, I've seen games where teams have exploded for a few runs or a couple players over the course of the season have had multiple in a game, but not as many times as it happened in the Valley last summer. I mean, we had players, you know, I think Aiden Nagel ended up with 11 home runs on the season to lead the league. And he hit a couple in a game. Multiple times we were talking about players hitting 2 runs in a game, home runs in a game. And I think that was really fun to watch, exciting. There's so many comebacks. I mean, there's so many times where you really thought a team was out and they hung in there until the very end. And I think that speaks volumes for the quality of coaching and the players, their drive, that they want to continue to fight. Even though they know they have another game tomorrow and another game the next day, they're not going to mail it in at any point. And I think that was cool too. You really never knew what was going to happen in a lot of these games.
Yeah. How about you, Jordan? What's your take on all of it?
My take on all this, because we've already talked about the hitting, obviously multiple times, and when we do games, I'll call a big hit game where we've got like 30 hits in the ball game or 20 or more runs combined. It's the VBL special coming into 2020. It's just this massive tray of baseball, and there's just hits and offense sprinkled all over the place. But to me, in my eyes, when I look at a season like this, and like what John said, you've got 8 players that really took off this season as opposed to one in particular. In regards to OPS from, you know, over a decade ago, that only makes games like what Shane Scott did with no hitters, that only makes those even bigger gems. Because when you really have a season where the summer was dominated by offense, for a guy, any guy, to step up to a mound and say, oh no, not tonight, and wag the finger like Mutombo, and then go on out there and throw a no-hitter, that just makes it even more special in my eyes.
Yeah, point well made. John, any reaction to that?
Yeah, I think that's true. When you have a good performance, it makes it even more special. And let's not forget that several of these teams play in tiny little stadiums too. You know, Strasburg Stadium is tiny. Winchester, they score a ton of runs there. That makes it harder yet.
Well, are you going to talk a little bit about your project? You've been going through talking about how home run friendly the stadiums are. You've been tracking that now for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Any reconnaissance to share at this point? I think you're 4 or 5 years into that project now, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's at least 5. They're called park factors, where you actually take the statistics that the home team puts up, and then versus the along with, I should say, the visiting team, and then you compare it with what happens on the road, and then with a lot of calculations. I do it all in a spreadsheet because I would mess it up terribly. But in 2019, yeah, the home runs in Strasburg, the home run park factor was 304, which, to put that in context, a park that is exactly equal for hitters and pitchers would come in at 100. The Strasburg was at 304, which means 204% more home runs are hit at Strasburg than what would be across the league. And then in Stanton, of course, I didn't even mention their tiny field, but they came in at almost 200 for their home run factor. And then you go all the way down to Harrisonburg. Their home run factor was 37, which means their park suppresses home runs by 63%. And Woodstock actually was at 47, which is 53% lower than average, which makes what Aiden Nagel and Caleb Ward and Lyle Lockhart do even that more impressive, actually, with playing half of their games in Woodstock.
Yeah, well, it's time we break the Aiden Nagel news. Aaron, you want to be the one to break the news? I think you've worked hard at it, so I think you got to be the one. The breaking news now. This is the first time the Valley Baseball League video podcast has got to say breaking news.
I finally caught up with Aiden Nagel, so we're going to have him on a podcast coming up, I think, next week. So I'm excited to share what he had to say about the Valley with everybody and what he's been up to now. He's still playing, he's still found a way, and he kind of has a really cool story about where he was at mentally before he jumped into playing in the Valley and how that's really helped him kind of gain some more confidence in his baseball abilities.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that next Monday. Aaron's been chasing him, I think, probably as long as the Valley Baseball League championship team has been chasing the pennant for the 2019 season. Really good work there. Can't wait to hear that one. Look, I got to share a little broadcast tidbit with you guys. I've been doing TV for a long time now. I'm pretty much into my third decade, and I've done a lot of book shows, but I've never actually put the text of a book on screen. But I really need to do that now because, so many times we've alluded to it, but we've never actually shown it. And what I want to do is give our fans a chance to see the amazing bit of work that John's done. I mean, this is just the playoffs. The playoffs start right here on the 28th of July. It's page 110, and I'm not even halfway through the document yet. I mean, he just completely went to town on the players, the stats, the games. John, I got to tell you that, I think if we've come on and said, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, mothers and fathers, just about as often as we've said, the annual that you put together is a completely amazing piece of work. I'm touched by the amount of effort you put into your park. What is it? Park Factor? What do you call it again?
Factors.
Park Factors. And then your new project sounds completely amazing. Incredibly time consuming. Not sure how you find the time or have the bandwidth to process it all, but Aaron, Jordan, what do we say to a guy who's put together a roadmap from the 2019 season? Like, I haven't seen anything else like it, and I've heard other people say they haven't either.
No, it's incredible. Thank you so much. I've never seen it in summer ball. Definitely very thorough. And I mean, there's a lot of Division I teams that I've covered that I don't see anywhere near that much information. So I truly appreciate it. It makes things a lot easier for us instead of having to kind of scramble through all the box scores and try to figure it all out. Each time we're looking at a game, it's all kind of gathered together for us. So it's awesome.
I'm glad it's helpful.
Yeah, Jordan, anything you want to add?
Yeah, aside from, like Aaron kind of said, how amazing of a piece of work it is and just how much simpler it's made our jobs when we're scrambling through our notes trying to get our podcast going for the week of games. But as a college reporter, I mean, I look at the work that I do in the past and I see stuff like this that John produces and I go, this is where I want to take my work. So it's definitely for people that are trying to get into that field like myself. It's definitely inspiring, and I appreciate getting a look at it because when I start making some more in-depth stuff in the future, I could definitely use that as something to kind of base my work off of, like what I want my end result to look like.
Yeah, really great work. It's still available for sale. It's $10, 85,000 words, I think, John. 200 and how many pages? 265, 285?
Yeah, something in the 270s, I think.
Yeah,
something like
worth
that.
every penny. So it's still relevant. Yeah, well, thank you for that. Thank you for joining us. Will you come back? Do you mind sticking with us and maybe doing a few podcasts and talking about playoff games? Can we try to rope you into that?
Yep.
All right. Well, you're a trooper. Aaron, Jordan, so are you. And so I'll just wrap this up now by saying, really appreciate everyone's effort here. And on behalf of the league and the teams in this league, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I want to wish you all perfect health, and I want to wish you all a speedy return to the baseball diamond. You know, Major League's back there, so if they're getting back there, we know we'll be back there in the not too distant future. Until next time, for Aaron, Jordan, and John, everybody have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow night with another playoff game. Thanks, everybody.